Do you think birth order really matters? Some people think it does, and research seems to support the idea, and they have scientific findings. Well, Dr. Keith Canner is back to answer some of your questions. Welcome back to Primetime.
Birth order. It
Birth
does,
order.
you know, for a couple of reasons. One, it has to do with when you're born, but then the timing of how close you are to your siblings. So there's two different issues here.
Okay, well, let's go with the stereotypes. Like, briefly define the firstborn, the middle child, the baby. Talk about that.
Typically, the first child is the one who actually tests out to be the smartest. How about that? That research indicates that more firstborns go to Harvard and Ivy League schools than second or thirds. So they tend to be smarter. However, there's other areas that they tend not to be as good as some of the other kids. For example, the younger kids tend to be more sociable. They tend to be funnier.
Confident,
and they turn out, a lot of them turn out to be comedians.
You totally described my baby. My 8-year-old is like the clown.
Practical jokers, class clowns, youngest one. Middle ones, it's interesting. The middle ones, as one would predict, you know, sandwiched between two, they tend to kind of take from both. It's kind of interesting. Some of them, you know, identify more with the older, and some of them identify with the younger. But what's interesting is oftentimes in the teenage years, this is where it gets interesting. The middle child will act the opposite of the older sibling. So if you've got a teenager who's like, you know, really doing well, your middle child may not do well. Okay, to kind of play off the differential between the parents. So that's what our research indicates in terms of, you know, first, second, and third borns. But it's really important to understand when you have your kids. For example, if you have your kids 2 years apart, which most people do, the kids are born in the same developmental framework time. So you've got 2 toddlers. That's hard. 2 toddlers or 2 middle children. If you separate the kids by 3 years, if you can wait and do it, it's much better, because then when you have your baby, your 3-year-old will actually be in a different developmental phase. They may actually help you take care of.
But on the flip side of that, Keith, if that's the case, and then the 3-year-old sees the baby getting all the attention, and is more needy, but 3-year-olds don't understand that, and they might not feel as loved, you know?
Well, it depends. If they got enough early, like if you really pampered and took care of your firstborn, and they're moving into the toddler years, see, most toddlers are wanting to move away from their parents. They want to be independent. So not so much. But when you have the baby, of course, it reminds them of the good old days. So they will regress a little bit and go back. But usually, you know, if it's 3 years apart and they're really on track.
The key is, and what I heard you say is, if you've given them enough.
You have to.
If you filled their love cup enough.
It has
so
to be
it's
enough.
overflowing. Then they've got the confidence and the security to accept that.
Well, that works in all developmental stages. As we move through, love is the answer. If there's enough love given, then kids move along. If not, then they tend to get stuck. So love's important. But
let's go to some questions.
You love these. Gotta love the questions. I don't even know what they are.
But question 1, I have 4 kids, and my youngest one is 9 months old. How do I make the older children understand that the baby in the family requires more attention, and I can't always spend quality time with each of them?
It's a great question. Well, it's interesting. Older kids forget what they were like as babies, as we all do. So you have to remind them that, look, babies take a lot of time. They're 100% needy. They have to feed. They have to be taken care of.
They're 100% dependent on their parent.
And they are, absolutely. And so you have to explain that to the other kids that, hey, you were like this once too. But this is where it's really important that kids make sure that when you have kids, you spend alone time with each kid. And it's very, very important that when you have a baby, that the other kids still get attention. 10, 15 minutes you spend with them, or your husband or mate spends time with them too, because they get very jealous and they long for the kind of the old close days, even if they're teenagers.
Can I tell you, I'm still jealous of my little sister.
Well, we can talk about that.
We need extra time after the show.
Okay, still now? Still after all these years?
She's the baby. She gets all the attention.
Still?
Oh yeah, still. Absolutely.
We'll talk to your parents about that.
That's okay. But it made me, it reminded me that I need to give all my kids attention, and I'm very cognizant of that. Trying to make them feel equal.
Fairness, really, really important.
Very important.
Yeah, you know what that's like.
Never make one child feel more loved than the other.
No,
very
you have
important.
to make each kid feel special for themselves.
Okay. Question 2. Here's our next question. I have twin boys, and one gets really jealous and competitive. How perfect that I've just brought this. How can I diminish that type of attitude between the two?
Okay, so we're talking about.
Reminds me of the biblical brothers back in the Old Testament,
but it's this thing where
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel. Sibling rivalry. It's normal. Kids are going to fight. They're going to get, especially if they're close in age. Twins, oh my gosh. I mean, even more so because they're like at the same time. And twin studies are interesting too because it's like they play off different parts of each other. One's kind of the funny one, one's the smart one, and they get very competitive. So what you have to do with twins, it's really important, is get them in different types of activities. 2 different sports.
So they have their own identity.
Yeah, when you put twins in the same sport, the same class, the same thing, you get problems typically. So getting them some separation from each other is very, very important. That decreases competition. Secondly, and we talked about this before, when you play with them, put them on a team against you. So you're actually putting your kids on a team against you, and kids love to team up against their parents. I mean, that's like the all-time fun. Because we're bigger than they are, and they like to beat us. You know, and they're used to losing at school. See, at school, you lose half the time, you win half the time. If the parent's smart, you make sure your kids beat you until you know you want to like teach them how to lose. But it's a big win for them to beat parents.
I like
so these
that.
are good things. So twins are, you know, break them up and let them
All
play
right.
against you.
Here's our next question. How do I encourage my youngest child to follow his older sister's lead without making a comparison? Ooh, I think I might do this. The eldest is a straight A student and active in extracurricular activities.
Okay, so this is exactly what we were talking about before. And if it's a teenager and you've got another team, oftentimes there's such a fear of failing and not living up to the expectations of that other sibling that oftentimes they give up. So this is where, like we talked about, you said, you know, fill that love cup. When you make all your kids feel really, really good about themselves, whatever they like to do, school, sports, art, drama, what that does inadvertently is it takes away that competitive issue with the other kid, and because they're feeling good about themselves in one area, they'll naturally move it over, and you never want to compare. You never want to compare them. It's really, you know, how come you're not getting as good a grades as your brother? And that doesn't feel good. But like, by pushing them in the other areas that they do well, they decide they want to succeed, and then it blends over into school.
On the one hand of not comparing them, when you have a child that is maybe a straight A student or has good manners or whatever it is, you're saying don't compare them, even though they have exemplary, whatever, their behavior is so wonderful. You'd want them to follow that. But what if you have a child who doesn't have who has maybe a behavioral problem, and you don't want the next child to follow that example? Then how do you do?
Well, you want to work with that child. I mean, it's very importantly that.
But if they're an example in the house, and that, you know how siblings become their most significant other at some point, right?
Absolutely. So what you have to do is, if you've got a child who's having some difficulties, then you definitely want to work with that child to help them manage things better, however that might be. But, you know, saying don't be like your brother is not a good point. But what's going to happen is that the siblings watch what happens. So if you have a kid who's acting out in your house and he's getting in trouble,
they're already learning.
They're learning. Hey, you know what? That's. I really don't want to lose my, you know, cell phone or my Xbox or something. So they're watching this, and most kids will go, God, I don't want that to happen.
So you don't think there would be likely to mirror the behavior? They would just
well, okay. Mirroring behavior happens if they get reinforcement. If kids are reinforced for something and there's a benefit from it, then the other kids will follow along. If there's not a benefit or a loss, then they tend not to.
I love how you break it down and simplify positive parenting.
It's so important.
You're the expert, and I'm so happy.
Thank you. It's great to hear. I love this
Too
stuff.
bad I didn't meet you years ago.
Oh, well, you know, I'm here now.
Yay! Well, okay, so next Friday, we are going to have you on the show every Friday. Please send in your questions, folks. Anything. It doesn't matter.
We'll take it.
Dr. Canner.
We'll answer it.
Alias Keith would be happy to answer them, and it makes for an interesting show.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Stay dry. It's raining.
Yes. Be careful. Okay, we got to take a quick break.